good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening for a few of you. My name is Dan Ripke. I'm the Executive Director of the Educational Association of University Centers. So welcome. This is our bi-monthly webinar that we hold in conjunction with the Economic Development Administration, where we talk about a variety of topics of interest to the EDA university centers around the country. So this is our largest panel. Bernadette, this is quite the panel you put together here of topics and speakers. So, and it's also, I'm going to make sure, there we go. It's also our most packed agenda. So we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to keep my remarks to less than 2 minutes, perhaps one if I can get away with it. But Bernadette and I are going to do some brief introductions. We are joined by Nancy Gilbert from EDA as the Economic Development Integrator. She will be talking about EDA's role in broadband. We'll also be joined by best practices in university centers, talking about sharing our successes online, by Emery and Mary Ellen Thomas. We'll have a brief discussion there, and then we have a presentation from the University of Wisconsin. And then finally, last but not least, we have a special digital presentation. It's a video that was prepared about a week ago by Bernadette and I, working with Purdue University. Real quick to go into my sharing of information, mostly I just wanted to share some funding opportunities that have become available in the last couple of days. Actually, the one on the screen there is something that just came out this morning. It's funding to really help underwrite student interns and career development opportunities. I know a lot of people in economic development use interns to a high degree. So that's a great opportunity for students. Quite a few of you reached out to me about the low funding that was available back in January. And so that funding opportunity has closed, but we'll let you know when that window does open up again. And then there are about 5 opportunities that universities can apply for under USDA. So I will be posting that information and sending it out to our various members. So, and then I'll work with Christy and Bernadette to send out a survey right after this webinar to gather topics for our next webinar. So with that, let me turn it over to Bernadette.
Great, thank you. So just wanted to flag a new frequently asked questions document. Well, it's not it's a new web page on EDA's performance and GPRA website. There's a list of questions that we have been getting from both grantees and staff that we thought would be of interest to many of our university centers who are going to be or have already maybe even started responding to the new GPRA questionnaires. So I would encourage you to read through those. And if you have any other questions that aren't on that page, to reach out to the performance email inbox that is also listed as a place for you to reach out for questions. So I just wanted to flag that as a new resource within the last month that is available on our website. Another resource I wanted to flag is there's some nuclear closure communities funding available that there are a number of communities across the country that have a nuclear power plant, and that is possibly slated to close in the near future or long-term future. And I know that many of your university centers are working with economic development districts and other local partners. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that there is funding available for projects to help diversify economies and prepare for a sustainable future without a nuclear power plant. So that is funding that's available through our standard WIA NOFO. So there's more information on our website about that. And then there's also a new FY21 Build to Scale NOFO that was recently published, and the closing date is April 29th. This is for the Venture Challenge and the Capital Challenge. So make sure you check out the website listed on the screen for more information about the program and to access the NOFO. So those are the only updates that I had from EDA. So before we get to success stories on social media, I just want to turn it over to Nancy Gilbert actually to speak for a little bit about a topic that is becoming more of a hot topic lately. Broadband and the federal government role in that, kind of some recent conversations that have been taking place around broadband and access to that. So Nancy?
Thanks, Bernadette, and thank you to this group. Bernadette, did you want me to share my screen, or you want to share the slides if you can?
Yeah, if you want to share your screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, let me try that on Zoom. Here. Is that working for you guys? Try this one, if not. And change it to this view. This is just quickly wanted to share with everyone before you hear from the presenters on their University Center broadband study for rural areas that EDA does and has received a lot more interest in how we can fund and support broadband expansion as an economic development strategy. So I wanted to highlight here that there's 3 programs that primarily are a vehicle for supporting this important condition for economic prosperity, especially in underserved and disconnected areas. Economic adjustment assistance is the one we primarily are using to fund broadband, and increasingly through our supplemental funds for disaster areas, and certainly now under the CARES Act. We've also done a few projects, very few, but a few under public works where it is regards construction. And of course, building broadband expansion and digital connectivity into a SEDS plan is definitely part of the strategy that we recommend going forward. Wanted to share with you to give a sense of what EDA does do in terms of the broadband support that we can provide through our grant program. I've listed a number of examples here, and we'll share the slides with you, I think, afterwards. So not expecting you all to read this, but wanted to give a flavor of some of the projects we've done, a lot of feasibility studies, a lot of technical assistance and deployment type studies for economic development districts, for tribal communities, and again, for communities that have been impacted by disasters looking to rebuild. We have done some creative projects where we've been able to build facilities where there'll be either a telehealth center or fiber optic network going into, for example, a industrial park, so that they can, these communities can attract the kind of forward-looking businesses that will diversify their economies. And we've done this in coal communities that are looking to transition, like I said, to sort of healthcare or advanced manufacturing type diversification strategies. So some of these have been large. A lot of the strategy grants tend to be on the smaller side. And again, we've made about 14 to 15 of these awards. So it's certainly not something that some of our partners do on a larger scale, but it is an important part of economic development. These can be pretty complex projects, so it's always good to start with the economic development representative to talk about whether or not we can do that particular project. So the other point I wanted to make, just the economic development integration team is what I am on, and we're always looking to see how our stakeholders can use EDA funds to leverage or catalyze other resources in federal government to really fill the gaps and to make a project work at scale. And wanted to share with you a kind of example there where you can really blend together different federal funds that are available to have this connectivity type of strategy. Here we gave a strategy award to the Seneca Nation in upstate New York. A tribal project here to get their data center ready with student professional computers and this kind of thing. That allowed them to prepare themselves for a USDA Reconnect, Rural Reconnect grant. So that was really an infrastructure type of grant that was larger and allowed them to scale. It helped optimize their CDFI fund, so bringing in new capital. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Indian Energy and Economic Development Department also provides grants, and this sort of infrastructure network allowed them to build their tourism strategy. So that's the kind of blended funding that can be possible. And I know the report you'll hear about has touched on some of that. So the last slide to leave you with, and again, we'll send these out and there's some hot links in here, is some of our partners, and importantly, the Department of Commerce, where EDA is, also houses NTIA, the National Telecom and Information Administration, and they have Broadband USA, which some of you are very familiar with, but a couple of their key resources are a federal programs guide, which EDA is in, but also USDA and HUD and many other programs you can find there, and they identify the amount of funds that are available. An update to that is going to be out in the next couple of months or even sooner. If there's a state broadband leader, there's about 22 states that are putting their data into this broadband availability map. So you can see sort of speed data. It's better than the FCC data, but you do need to go through a state broadband agency in order to see that information, but it is there and it's available. There is a broadband leaders network and they indicate the POCs there. And importantly, they're going to be introducing new broadband grant programs. There's a March 17th webinar that's being hosted at Broadband USA. The link is here. And they're going to talk about their $1 billion in tribal broadband funding that is going to be launched soon, as well as a smaller infrastructure grant program with state and private partnerships. And then also maybe to this audience, importantly, a minority broadband initiative that is to connect HBCUs and other minority serving institutions and their communities to participate. And again, other key partners, USDA Rural Development, Appalachian Regional Commission, for those of you in that area, and certainly the Department of Interior when it comes to tribal broadband grants. They have a broadband grant program that's also sort of feasibility studies. So this is just a flavor, a little more resources there at the bottom on our EDI pages. I hope that's a good setup for what you're going to talk about later.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate you going through that with us. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A below, and we will make sure to get to those at the end or respond later via email. So now I just want to turn it over to Anne-Marie and Mary Owen Thomas for their presentation on social media strategies before we get into the broadband presentations. Dan, can you share your screen?
Nancy, can you stop sharing yours? Let's see.
Do it again.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right. All right, how are we doing? There we go.
Doing well. Great. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Bernadette and Nancy, for having us today. We're really excited to be with you guys. So good afternoon. My name is Anne-Marie Fox. I'm a public affairs specialist with EDA, and I primarily manage the digital media program. And Mary is with our Chicago regional office, and she's been a huge asset to our public affairs division. We've expanded a bit, so we're really excited. But today we just kind of want to talk about best practices for university centers to share their success stories on social media. So next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
So first, we just want to kind of like share, what we are active on. And we're currently active on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. These are the direct links. We highly encourage you to follow us. If you haven't already, follow us, like us, tag us, comment. And we are considering using a new hashtag with you guys so we can monitor and use it when we share posts about EDA university centers. So that is EDA UV centers or hashtag EDA. I think we can really start a conversation online and get some traction, get some more engagement, and get a little bit more visibility of all the great work that you guys are doing across the country. And so next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary. Prior to coming to EDA, I actually worked at a university. So I know that a lot of you guys have really robust marketing communications teams, but I know it's not all of the marketing communications teams are on this call. So I just wanted to level the playing field and just go over some general best practices for posting on social media. So tag us, of course, use the hashtags that Anne Marie had just pointed out, EDA, Univ Centers, and EDA. Use crisp, clear photos, good photos, always, get more engagement. Use short, informative videos, and we're going to talk a little bit more about videos and how they do so much better with the algorithm, getting in people's feeds. When you post something, make sure to share a link to the EDA's website or to your own website or to a media story. So just make sure you're driving traffic somewhere else where people can get more information about your project. And when you do post, send us a link to the post, because that, you may tag us, but we may miss it. So if you send us a link, we'll be like, oh yes, this is something we want to share on our platforms. But also don't be afraid to send those links to your stakeholders for them to reshare. Not everybody's on social media all the time, despite what we think. So don't be afraid to share those links to those posts and send them out and let people share them, reshare them in their own news feeds. And then of course, post during peak hours. Morning when people are just, checking their emails and figuring out what's going on in the day, lunchtime when everybody's taking a break, end of the workday, like 4 or 5, people are checking their social media before they end the day, and then the golden hour of 7 to 8 o'clock. So those are the best times but again, work with your marketing communication teams. And if you're a smaller university, you don't have as robust of a team, definitely reach out to us and we can help as well. So next slide. And I included this because they always say to put graphics in your PowerPoint. So tag us. This is just a reminder to tag us. So next slide, Anne Marie.
Yes, tag your it. No, okay, I'm sorry. So, but also if you've got a big announcement coming up or you've got some big news coming up, ping us, send us an email, or, get in contact with Bernadette, and Bernadette can get in contact with us. I think this actually happened with the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They pinged the Chicago regional office, and then they were able to get to Mary, and then Mary was able to get to me, and then we were able to see that this big broadband and the Wisconsin economy report was coming out. And so we partnered together, drafted up a little post, got the appropriate link that they wanted featured, and when they shared it, we posted it as well. And so this is just a good example of how we can work together to kind of showcase the work that you guys are doing and just get it out to like a wider audience. So next slide.
So video, as some of you know, video just does so much better in the news feeds, right? So I always say that if a tree falls in a forest, nobody hears it. If you post on social media and nobody engages with it or sees it, it's like you never posted at all. So if you are interested in doing a video post, consult with one of us, reach out to us, and we'll brainstorm and we can think about like what is the best way to do a video and present it. If you do videos, shoot horizontal, right? And then ensure your subject is well lit, the audio is good, keep it short and tight, and of course mention that EDA supported your project with a grant. So shout out to everybody. So next slide. And one thing that we're really interested in starting to leverage is this stories tool on the different platforms. And we're going to show you an example of what we did with the University of Wisconsin. But these are basically, you can see at the top, this is an example of my social media feed. And these little stories are up at the top. And so basically you're kind of circumventing the algorithm, right? Like you're getting right at the top of people's news feeds, right? And so like increasing the chances that people see your story. But yeah, so we want to do that. And if you're interested in doing that, that would be about a 20-second video, 1 or 2. We did a few of those with some of our grantees. That would be shooting vertical. And of course you would mention EDA and keep it tight and explain what your project is. So LinkedIn and Twitter, you can only see stories on your phone. So you'd have to look at the app to see their version of stories. But Facebook, you can see it on the desktop version. So next slide, Anne Marie's going to talk about what we did with the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, so this is Tessa, and Tessa did a fabulous job, and she actually sent in, I think it was exactly 23 seconds. So it was very easy and it was optimal to share through the Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter stories. And then of course we threw a little bit of text over it, and we were able to embed the link tag UW-Madison, so people could, know exactly where it was coming from and view the full report. And so this is, again, we're just kind of, and it's actually very relevant with what Nancy was talking about. This is a broadband report. And so this is something that we want to do more of with you guys. If you guys have a big announcement coming out, or you just kind of want to showcase, a specific project or initiative you're working on. And then, like Mary said, like keeping it very concise and short, but also getting in like, how is it helping the region, or how is it helping the local community? How is this project helping folks, in economic development and help, bringing jobs, attracting investment, creating, and doing great things for the area. So next slide, please. And then another more traditional avenue is just success stories. So if you visit our website, eda.gov/success stories, you can kind of see a couple of examples where we actually go in and interview grantees, and their projects may have been completed, or they're still kind of, they're midway through, but they've actually had some impact already. They've already seen some real metrics, and that might be a new employer came to the town, or new jobs were created, or additional private investment came to the community. Something that has already happened and transpired, and is really showing the impact of the work that the grantee is doing. And so we love these. We would take them all year round. And so yeah, if you have any success stories, or you think you have a good candidate for a success story that you'd like us to feature, and you have someone you'd want to interview, because we would want to get a quote, possibly do a video, this is something to consider. So next slide, please.
And so we take a lot of those, we take those success stories and we also repackage them, not just on social media, but also in newsletters. And because we're increasing our public affairs capacity in our regional offices, we are able to do these newsletters, and we're just starting to kick off more kind of targeted newsletters. So monthly, for years, we've done the Innovative EDA monthly newsletter, right? That comes out monthly, that'll continue. But just in February, the Denver regional office started their newsletter, where it just featured news from grantees and stakeholders in the Denver region. And coming out this month, Chicago is going to have a newsletter. So we're going to probably give a shout out to the University of Wisconsin, about their broadband report. But this is another great way to let people know about the great things that you guys are doing. And so again, and newsletters will reach different people than social media, and it's just a different way. And so at the bottom, there's also a link to how you can subscribe to our newsletters and check which topics you're interested in doing, which regional office news you're interested in getting. So yeah, and this will all come in the slide. So next, yep. And this is just an example of the top of the Denver regional office. But this link I'm also going to dump in the chat box as well, and you can just get a flavor of what the newsletter looks like as well. So I was going to click on it, but it's too complicated to share my screen, I think. But I'll dump the web page. There you go. Oh, Bernadette did it. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Bernadette. Yeah, so and shameless plug, if you haven't signed up for our newsletters, please consider doing it today, or doing it right now, or following this webinar. That we would really appreciate it. But we're almost at the end of our presentation, so we kind of want to engage you guys and have an idea time. And so we came up with an idea we were thinking about doing, but we want to get your thoughts before we actually execute. And so in April, we were thinking about doing a university center week-long campaign on social media, and we want to make it as easy and painless as possible. And so pretty much we would just ask you to share a concise post about a specific project or initiative that you're working on right now. Tag us, we will amplify. Oh, and also like use the hashtag. But I'm thinking if we could do this between the week, I think it's April 12th to the 16th, that gives us a little bit more than a month to like think about this. And if we're all out online Monday through Friday, kind of sharing the, posts about the work that we're doing, I think we could really drive a lot of attention, a lot of amplification, engagement, and visibility to all the work the EDA University Centers are doing around the nation, especially at this very, critical time in our nation's history. So I want to throw that out for a Q&A and see if anybody has a question or a thought on that.
And while people are maybe posting comments or wanting to just say whether they thumbs up or thumbs down, maybe we can go to the next slide also, because I'm seeing people are interested in figuring out who to contact, right? People are, and so here's Anne-Marie Fox's contact info, my info. We also, like I mentioned, we're ramping up our public affairs capacity in the different regional offices. Paige Wilson is in Denver, Toby Nelson is in Seattle, and Atlanta, we don't have a person based out of that office, but if you just email Anne-Marie or me, we'll make sure that we can find capacity elsewhere in public affairs to promote Atlanta regional office news. So
getting a couple of thumbs up and great ideas in the chat and in the Q&A. So it seems like there's support for this, and I would encourage anyone to reach out if they have any questions about any ideas of what they have and how they might package that on social media for greatest impact. I'm sure Anne-Marie and Mary would be interested in sharing their thoughts and ideas with you guys too. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything coming through. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you guys for all of that helpful information, and hopefully folks will start using the hashtag for university centers. Very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bernadette. Thank you for having us.
thanks, everyone.
All right. Up next is University of Wisconsin.
I need to unmute myself. I just want to say that the previous presentation, we've really been able to take advantage of the resources that you've provided. And I think that kind of providing that technical support and that counseling and that coaching has been really, really powerful. But the report that we want to present today that Matt and I want to share with you is some work that we've been doing on broadband in Wisconsin. Next slide. Prior to the pandemic, this is a map of the coverage, and the lighter the color is the lower the coverage. We've actually got a lot of places in rural Wisconsin where the access to broadband is practically non-existent. And prior to the pandemic, this was not really viewed as a particularly bad issue. There was this perception that broadband was really used for social media and Netflix and things like that. And that, there really wasn't a role for government. There was kind of a philosophy at the state level that Adam Smith's invisible hand will work and we'll just let the competitive markets kind of fill in. So there's kind of a bit of a stalemate before the pandemic. Next slide, please. However, when the pandemic hit and the safer home orders came out, suddenly the conversation changed rapidly. And what changed the conversation was remote learning for K-12 education. It was essentially found that many rural residents and many low-income residents simply did not have access to adequate broadband in order to take advantage of the distance learning that the schools had shifted to. Suddenly, this topic has raced to the top, and now there's a wider recognition at the state level and the local level that broadband is not a luxury, it's a necessity moving forward. Next slide, please. So what we tried to do as an EDA UC is to say, how can we help inform the decision-making process moving forward? We've been working on broadband for a number of years now, but we thought that the timing was right for something a little bit more in-depth and focused on this particular issue. But there were just the four of us. And it was really kind of a bigger issue than we could tackle. Next slide. But with the CARES funding, we were able to actually add a number of people to the team, particularly Professor Gail Huck and Professor Chris Stark, who are Extension County based educators who are working with communities one-on-one. And they were able to bring a dimension about kind of hands-on practicality, kind of moving it out of the ivory tower of the university and actually kind of placing it on the ground in terms of, how can we best present information, what information, and how best to present the information to local decision makers so that they can have more informed decisions. We were able to also hire a graduate student and a recently graduated student to primarily increase the level of professionalism of the reports. And I think that this is something that has really improved almost the credibility. I mean, it didn't change the nature of the work. It didn't change the analysis or the policy recommendations, but the visual presentation of the reports has really been significantly increased. And we were able to do that because we had the resources to hire the staff that could actually do that. Next slide, please. It was important that we leverage partners, that we were not working in isolation. And there were 3 partners that were involved in this project from the beginning: the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, the Office of Rural Prosperity, which was a new office that was formed in our Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, which is the state agency. It's not an agency, it's a public-private organization, to kind of bring some of the resources to the state. And then there's the governor's task force on broadband that we fed a lot of back and forth in terms of what was the relevant information that was necessary to move policy discussions forward. Next slide. So these are the reports. We have basically 2 large reports. One is kind of more of a data analysis focused report, talking about big pictures. What do we know? What don't we know? More data oriented. The second report is really aimed at policy options. And what are other communities outside of Wisconsin doing in terms of being innovative? And then we put together a series of fact sheets to kind of make these a little bit more digestible, because a lot of policymakers don't have the time or the inclination to read a 40-page report, but they will read a 1-page front and back fact sheet. And we were ready to go in December of 2020. Next slide, please. But we wanted to leverage networks to get the work out. And one of the networks, next slide, please. One of the key networks is the Wisconsin State Journal. This is the Madison newspaper. It's the second largest newspaper in the state of Wisconsin. And we've had a working relationship with them, as well as Wisconsin Public Radio, for a number of years now, in terms of providing research reports and whatnot. And they had decided that they wanted to do a feature story on the broadband in Wisconsin, and it dragged out. It really dragged out. That's why the report was ready to go in early December, but it didn't get released until January because we embargoed it for the Wisconsin State Journal to do it. We were pleasantly surprised. It came out in the Sunday paper, which has the largest circulation of the Wisconsin State Journal. We thought maybe we'd get some coverage in the business section. It was on the front page of the Sunday paper. It was well worth waiting. It got a tremendous amount of attention. Next slide, please. It's also gotten picked up by CBS Market Watch. This was, in essence, people in Wisconsin are actually referring reporters to our work. This connection, the reporter for was CBS Market Watch, was actually talking to a manufacturer in Wisconsin, and the manufacturer, the CEO, said, "Hey, you ought to look at this report that just came out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison." So not only are we getting coverage across the state, we're also getting national coverage. Next slide, please. The other way is, this is Brittany Barr down on the lower left-hand side. She's the chair of the governor's task force on broadband. And she's been a real advocate of promoting this particular study. This is Wisconsin Eye. It is kind of Wisconsin C-SPAN, if you will. And it actually gets a lot of attention. And she really promoted our work on the Wisconsin Eye. So again, our partners, because we are working with our partners from the very beginning, they had a sense of buy-in to the report and a sense of ownership to the report. Next slide, please. This is some of the social media. You've already seen some of Tessa's work. This is an example of us kind of using our own internal social media. We're trying to get the university to do more work. The Division of Extension has been promoting this quite heavily. UW-Madison to some extent. But also turning to the Chicago EDA office to help us leverage this and make this work has just really kind of had a snowball effect, if you will. And we're getting a lot of mileage out of this particular set of studies and analysis. Next slide, please. I'll stop there, but I think that this is an indication of kind of if we're going to do this report, let's take our time. Let's make sure that we built the correct partnerships so that this isn't kind of just an ivory tower university-based report, but something that was done in conjunction with our partners. Because of that, those partners took ownership in the analysis and are now kind of promoting the work. And with that, the EDA University Center is being kind of put in the forefront. And it took longer than we normally would like these reports to take, but in hindsight, doing the groundwork to build those partnerships and leverage those partnerships and work with the media to get it out there, it was worth kind of delaying it. We were ready to release it back in, be honest with you, we were ready to release it back in July, but we just kept building that momentum and it lasted. So if there's any questions, or Matt, if you want to add anything, and also Chris Stark is on the call if Chris wants to add anything.
I just want to reiterate, Steve, what you mentioned in terms of the timing and the extra effort going into to build these relationships. You know, obviously it helped this product, but it's obviously going to help us going forward as well. You know, having these media relationships and also having better means of distributing some of this information across social media. So it was well worth the wait for sure.
It was, and the other, as I mentioned, is having the resources to be able to put it into a format that is much more professional looking. This is, I think, increasingly important. And the visual presentation of the report, I think, is just has given it a certain amount of credibility, independent of the work.
Yeah, thank you both so much. There's a question in the Q&A that I'll bring up. So the question is, have you aligned the needs of this report with the new funding available in the December COVID package to help address the funding gaps in Wisconsin?
The funding gaps are, we point them out, but what we're trying to do really is that is something that the task force, one of our partners, is really going to pick up and run with. Not only the governor's task force on broadband, but also the Office of Rural Prosperity has kind of said that they're in a better position to kind of advocate for those funding gaps. So we kind of bring it out and mention it, but our partners are actually moving that discussion forward. So that was kind of a strategic. The second question about the data, the quality of the data, that is one of the big takeaways that we argued, and Matt Cures spent a lot of time on this, is the quality of the data. The FCC data is really, really inferior. And those that have worked in this area a lot kind of know that. So we're kind of, a lot of communities now in Wisconsin realize that the FCC data is not very good. So we're working with a lot of communities to help them actually go out and survey and do inventory analysis so that they have a alternative set of data that they can bring to the policy discussions, to the policy makers. The other thing is that when K-12 schools all went remote, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction took a major initiative to find out what % of kids in public schools do not have access to the internet. And their initiative has been just a wealth of data. And the disconnect between what the FCC is saying and what these alternative kind of primary data collection methods are showing is that there's a huge disconnect there. And that is something that the state is trying to struggle with, because so much of the federal grants are based on the FCC data. So there's discussion in terms around that's a problem. How do we fix that problem? Or how do we address that problem?
And I'll say it real quickly. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, we all know how problematic the FCC data is. So we did try to tie in other data sets with the ACS and do some bivariate mapping to kind of point out some of those holes, but also, show other states and other initiatives where they're doing granular mapping that the Data Act hopes to put in place as well. And again, really just to show how poor the data really is in a lot of places. And I think, again, for people that know that, yeah, they know it, but a lot of other people do not.
Chris Stark, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I unmuted you.
I see that there, and I'm looking at the question, is there a strategy to provide access where this does not currently exist? And there is. I'm the one in the rural area, so I think that there certainly is no one silver bullet nationwide to answer that question. And what we have done in the rural counties that I am in is work the grant system, meaning especially in Wisconsin, the Public Service Commission happens to be where the state broadband office is housed. And in that case, a 50-50 match of private to, you have to have a local match of 50%, and that's done in various ways. But that is one way, and one of the main ways in Wisconsin where we are getting access. And we don't even want to talk about adoption yet. That's an entirely different subject, but just getting access through that means, and through things like the EDA grants and the USDA rural connectivity grants to make these happen and to provide what I call infrastructure deployment. So in a lot of cases, even though FTTP, fiber to the premises, is the preferred, everybody knows that's, I hope that's the end game but certainly we have to do a lot of wireless deployment in rural areas, because at this point in time, and it may be an interim fix, perceived by people differently. But at this point in time, we have to do our best means of getting broadband access to people. And certainly because of the return on investment, when you have people that may live a mile apart in some of the counties in northern Wisconsin, wireless is a realistic strategy to help solve that.
Chris mentioned two things. And I know we're getting close on time here, so I'll keep it quick. One of the things that was not being discussed before the report came out was that it's not just an infrastructure problem, it's an affordability issue. I think that a lot of people were surprised that for a lot of low-income families, even working class families, the subscription rates are just simply too high. So even if the infrastructure's there, they can't afford it. That had not been being discussed before the study came out. The other thing is the adoption that Chris has mentioned, is that this is more of a long-term kind of educational programming, is that, okay, now you've got it, what do you do with it? And focusing on helping small businesses in rural communities use broadband more effectively in increasing the efficiency and profitability of their businesses. That's going to be a longer-term initiative that we're going to be taking up.
Great, thank you so much. That was a really great discussion. I'm glad that a couple of questions. I didn't see any others coming through, but actually there was just one now. In Nebraska, we have a broadband measurement project in our rural area through our university. Is there a national network that I can share with our university team to assure they are linked to other great initiatives?
I think that this is showing, from a Wisconsin perspective, showing what other states are doing and how we're behind other states. That kind of competitive juice comes into play. So anytime that we can find out that another state is kind of doing something innovative, we'd love to collect that stuff because we can show that to our legislators and say, look at what Nebraska's doing. Why are they doing it and we're not doing it?
That's great. And I think, so we've got just enough time for us to share the last presentation with you. And then if folks are available, we can stay on for a couple of minutes after for more discussion. We're happy to do that. Otherwise, we may end up having another session focused on broadband. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and play this 12-minute presentation from Purdue University on their broadband work. Okay.
Hello, my name is Roberto Gallardo, and I am the director of the Purdue Center for Regional Development. I will be talking to you today on what our university center has been doing around broadband and digital inclusion. I'm delighted to be here. I'm sorry I cannot be live, but I appreciate the invitation. So before we get started, I just want to kind of make sure we define digital inclusion and then take it from there. We're going to define it, and then we're going to go over some resources, and then we're going to wrap up with some lessons learned and best practices from our end. So digital inclusion refers to the adoption of broadband technologies and its meaningful use for social and economic benefits. The research on this topic has been evolving. The first level of this divide was really focused on access, yes, no. The second level is now focusing on differences in internet use. So if you have access to it, are you using it differently, and why, and who is using it differently? And the third level divide looks at economic, cultural, social, and personal outcomes of this internet use, meaning the meaningful use for hopefully what would be benefits. How can we operationalize this digital inclusion concept? Is the National Digital Inclusion Alliance identifies 5 areas: affordable and robust broadband, internet-enabled devices that meet the needs of the user, digital literacy training, quality technical support, and applications and online content that encourage self-sufficiency, participation, and collaboration. Now, I want to make a little discussion here on this. Really, typically, digital inclusion is considered more of a social justice issue, but I think that these dimensions and the definition I shared previously do apply to regional development. It does apply to quality of life, community economic development, and so forth. So it does include minorities, low income folks, but it also should focus on your moms and pops, workers, and their skills. Do they have online presence, et cetera, et cetera. That's the premise from which I define digital inclusion is. And ultimately, what we ask our regions that we work with is, what's the answer to the question of, is your region digital inclusive? So again, it focuses on many things. So what have we done here at the center? Let me start with, this is what we've developed, what I call a toolbox, a digital inclusion toolbox that focuses on these 5 areas. Obviously, research, we develop resources, we provide technical assistance, we help with planning, and we also have developed education and training programs. As you know, our center is housed under the Office of Engagement, but we also have an extension mission. And so I think that puts us a little bit in a different light of maybe other centers that may be focused more on research, for example, or technical assistance only. We are kind of a hybrid in that respect. And so that's how we have been able to develop this toolbox, and you'll see shortly why. So this toolbox, again, is very important to keep in mind because it adds value to whatever broadband research you're doing or conducting. So on the research side, we conducted a study about 2 years ago that found that the ROI in rural broadband was 4-to-1 on average. This has gotten a lot of traction. It helps frame the discussion. Recently, we have published multiple journal articles on multiple topics around broadband and digital inclusion. Here are the links that you can click and find them. But I want to point out the Indiana 2019 State of Digital Inclusion. It's the second to last on this list. In the cover page you see to the right. Here we really looked at 15 different metrics, but the ultimate message, the message that we wanted to convey, or the main finding, is that we really don't have a good set of data that can help us on planning broadband infrastructure or digital inclusion. So that's why we put out this report, is to increase awareness on this issue. The last bullet point, that one is forthcoming, and we're finding a lot of very interesting stuff in this one. And you may be asking what has to do with digital inclusion with manufacturing and artificial intelligence. I think that if you're a digital inclusive region, you will make sure, or make sure that your manufacturers are able to adopt AI. It is a digital technology, so to me, that is another example of how digital inclusion is broader than a social justice issue, for example. So these are on the research front. On the resources, we've developed a lot of innovative metrics that help tell the story. It helps kind of conceptualize this abstract situation. We do the typical broadband availability. Instead of mapping the footprint like other areas, other centers or other entities do, we flip it and we show the areas that are outside the footprint, and show that color scheme in orange means the housing unit density outside a 120 footprint, for example. We've also been able to get speed test data results. It's the map to the right, where it shows the median speeds of thousands and thousands of speed tests. That also provides some information. Our popular digital divide index, a cousin of it, it's the digital distress. And then this year, or last year, we did the remote work and e-learning vulnerability, or REV, that helps regional stakeholders understand which areas would have a harder time engaging in e-learning or remote work for multiple reasons. I'm not going to go into the details, but these are some of the resources we've developed. On the planning technical assistance side, we have completed a county level comprehensive digital inclusion plan. We are currently working with 2 regions now to develop a regional comprehensive digital inclusion plan. Part of the process is completing intelligent community checklists. We've conducted 5,000 or more household data validation surveys. It's that left map on the bottom right, sorry. It shows responses. It helps communities better identify areas that may be unserved and that don't necessarily match the federal data set that we all know tends to overestimate coverage. We have developed interactive maps that overlay socioeconomic indicators to help in the planning process, and we have completed 6 state of broadband or digital inclusion reports, again, to frame the issue, to jumpstart these planning conversations, but more importantly, to increase awareness of this particular situation. On the educational training front, we've been very fortunate that, again, we have an extension mission. We're part of engagement, so we have partnerships with extension and other entities. We developed this Digital Ready Business program that helps moms and pops get an online presence. It's at a very basic level. We're currently revamping it for its 2.0 version. These are some results that we've had thus far. It's entirely online, available as well. We also developed a Digital Ready Community program that helps communities come up with a digital engagement plan. So they use digital assets they leverage digital assets to increase civic engagement and responsiveness and ultimately trust. This is a project that we're currently launching here in Indiana, and a community in Texas that contacted us about this program. We also are offering, in partnership with Utah State, a remote work certificate program. This is entirely online. It provides basic remote work skills. We're seeing this pick up, especially because of COVID, but we're also very, very proud of this, excited about this program as well. We have also launched one that complements this remote work. It's called Essential Digital Employability Skills Program, and it's free. You can take the course free. It was developed, the material was developed by Google and Microsoft. We just packaged it in a way that it's not overwhelming for folks. And if you can obtain a Purdue back badge if you want to, but we just launched this as well. And this one is a partnership with the Brian Lamb Communication School. We partner with communities. We conduct an online assessment of their reputation online, and then communication students come up with a plan to help them proactively manage that process, that situation. All of this, again, is part of this digital inclusion toolbox, where I think that if you are not digital inclusive, it's going to be harder for your region to compete in this 21st century. So these are just some of the examples of the resources and programs we've developed. What have we learned? Let me wrap up with sharing with you what have we learned. If possible, couple your center activities with extension and or engagement efforts. I think that's a win-win, regardless of which side you're looking at. You can better disseminate findings this way. Any report that you put out, of course, it can help extend that findings. It also gets you a better on-the-ground feel or pulse of what is needed. Most of these resources and programs, it's because we heard that regions needed this, and so we developed these over time to address those needs. I know that many of us may be more on the academic side of things, but try and make your reports where they can be readable or useful for multiple audiences beyond academic circles. I think that is very, very important, and that on-the-ground feel helps tremendously to tell that story correctly. Also, have an open mind. This is uncharted territory, most of it, so you have to have an open mind and see if there is room for innovative surveys and data tools and analyses and planning processes, hybrid, entirely online, face-to-face. There's multiple combinations, but we have learned to keep an open mind as a university center to be able to better adapt and respond to whatever the needs of our regions are. And then obviously, if you can couple beyond data analyses and you can couple with some sort of engagement or programming, that adds value to the university center engagement mission and research and economic development overall, is try and add value. If you can develop your own toolbox and kind of link whatever it is in a series of, okay, here's the data that leads to a plan that leads to programming, that's phenomenal. And last but not least, be wary of using broadband too much. And the reason for that, what we've learned is people immediately default to broadband as infrastructure. And as I've tried to make my point today, it's really being digital inclusive is much more than broadband connectivity. I know broadband connectivity is an issue, but if we focus only on that, we're missing the entire forest. And with it, competitiveness and so forth, and job creation and quality of life improvement and so forth. And I know broadband is attractive, right? It's a sexy term, but try not using it too much, because again, people will default to, oh, it's infrastructure only. And so I've seen that it will require a lot of time and energy on your part to really clarify that it's really beyond broadband infrastructure. What you're trying to do is really be inclusive, because that's the first step to then really be engaged in a digital transformation, which I think many of our communities and regions need in this 21st century to really adapt and prosper. So thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, I'm not live, but I know if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those via email or whatever method we decide. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Well, I know we are at time, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody for joining. I did talk, after the presentation that Roberto gave, we talked with him for a little bit about just some follow-up questions we had on, working with economic development districts on their regional digital inclusion process, and how to start that conversation if you don't have that conversation already started in your region. And that's something that he did have some insight into. Basically trying to use what's attractive now as broadband infrastructure, but pivot as quickly as you can into the conversation of digital inclusion and framing it that way so that it is more than just that infrastructure piece. Because as Roberto mentioned, it's a much broader issue. It's social justice, it's accessibility, it's a lot of things. And I know that you guys all know that, but I would encourage you to check out the toolbox that he mentioned. And we will certainly make his recording accessible separately if you need it, as well as the recording of this presentation. And we will have an opportunity for you to ask any follow-up questions that you have. And depending on what comes from that, we may do a follow-up session on broadband. So thank you all. I don't want to take up too much more time, but Dan, did you have anything else that you wanted to say?
No, just thank you to all the speakers. They were amazing content. We will be posting the recording of this later, so we'll get this up as soon as possible so you can share with your colleagues.
Great. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.